after a while, when they told me that my vision was not going to return, I came to the conclusion then, it was a very hard conclusion to come to, but that it was supposed to be this way because I had prayed my way through it. I had earnestly sought God's will in this process. And yet, all these complications that my doctor said statistically should have basically been impossible happened. And so I had to conclude that it was supposed to be this way.
Hi, and welcome to this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. I'm Byron Tyler. Pleasure to have you here today. Recently, one of our listeners from the Jackson area contacted me. I guess it was kind of the middle or the end of last year, Scott Duck, and he was telling me about a book he had written, telling me a little bit about his life, and we actually realized, Scott, that we have a family member that kind of connects us, don't we?
Yeah, Aunt Lois.
Yeah,
and Uncle Ed.
Aunt Lois and Uncle Ed, two wonderful people, and I think they were kind of like your grandparents, weren't they?
Yes, sir. They were. My grandparents had died by the time I was born on both my mother and father's side, and my Uncle Ed was my mother's brother and quite a bit older than her, and I came and spent time with them in the summers and whatnot, and I guess it was the closest thing I had to grandparents.
Back years ago, I remember seeing TV commercials here in Memphis about Duck's carpets. Duck Carpeting, and
yes.
Your family actually had do they still have a carpet company?
They don't. They closed them in 2007, I believe it was, but that was my dad, James Duck, and his brother, Joe, started that back, well, actually, and their dad started that as Duck's Market in 1954 and then changed it to Duck's Carpets in 1966, and so.
Well, that goes kind of way back, don't it?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, my. And then you and I actually met, you were around 8 years old, I think you said. I remember meeting you. You are legally blind.
I'm completely blind.
You're more than legally blind.
Yes. Well, I was born 3 months prematurely, and I was an identical triplet. And
wait a minute, you were an identical triplet?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm. And I was an identical triplet. I was the only one that survived. When I was born, weighed 2 pounds 3 ounces, lost down to 1 pound 15 ounces. And they initially told my parents that I was the third one born. And it's interesting because actually they didn't even know, my parents didn't even know that they were having triplets until we started being born. That my mother had told them that she said, this was her third pregnancy, and she said, I've never been this big at this point in my pregnancy before. And so, and they said, no, it's fine. And they even did the sonogram where they listened to the hearts, and all 3 hearts were beating in sync so much that they thought it was just one heart. And they literally didn't know until she started having us. She went into labor prematurely, and they didn't know there was more than one coming until a second one came out. And then, so I was number 3, and they told my parents that number 1 and number 2 probably would survive. Number 3 almost certainly would not because I was in the worst shape. And it ended up going the other way around, and Brad and Chris, who were my brothers, lived 20 and 24 days respectively. And but anyway, when a baby is born that prematurely, sometimes it will cause abnormal vasculature and scarring to form in the retina. It's a condition called retinopathy of prematurity, and I have that. And so initially I had vision, a little bit of vision in my right eye, which was only about 2,500, which with visual acuity, that means what most people can see that means that basically what you could see at 500 feet, I could see at 20 feet. And that was enough to let me get around in an area that I was somewhat accustomed to without bumping into too many things, and I could read print at about 20 times magnification. And then when I was 19, I had to have cataract surgery on both eyes. Severe cataracts very young is a complication of ROP. And the surgery on the left eye, where I had no vision anyway, went fine. The one on the right eye, to make a very long story short, caused a chain reaction series of surgeries and complications and surgeries to fix the complications and more surgeries. And 10 major eye surgeries later, it left me with no vision at all. And that was 19 years ago.
The fact that you're even with us, Scott, it was a miracle itself. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, because they did not at all expect me to survive from what my parents say. And then when I did survive, it was that they expected me to have severe neural deficits, neurological deficits, and none of that's the case. The only residual effect of my premature birth is my eye condition. And so, yes, I absolutely believe that was a miracle.
Okay, so when you lost a little bit of sight that you had, or a little bit of ability to make out images or light differences, I guess, with the help of magnification, able to read to some degree. When you lost all of that, I mean, did you feel like God had let you down?
Well, it scared me. I'll say that. As I went through this process, it wasn't. Initially they told me it wasn't initially clear that I would be completely blind. Initially, they told me that my vision should return, and as we went through this process of surgery after surgery and things weren't getting better, and I really prayed about this, and I prayed for what little vision that I had to return, because it was little vision, especially compared to what you see. But when it's all you got and you've learned to use it pretty well, it's still a lot to you, And so the prospect of of losing that scared me. And I really prayed through this process, and I prayed for I prayed for my vision to return, but above all, I prayed for God's will to be done.
Yeah.
And Christians say that a lot, but it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to be truly sincere about it. And I found out through that process, it can be hard to say it and really mean it, not my will, but thine be done. And to truly mean it, especially once you come to the place where you figure out that you think you know what God's will is, you think that it doesn't coincide with your will, and you're pretty sure that what God's will is scares you to death.
What's the biggest challenge to not having eyesight for you? Because that's not the worst thing that can happen to you, is it? I mean, seriously. I mean,
oh no,
because there's people who have sight,
no.
and there's so much that they're missing.
Everybody in this world has something that makes their life harder than the next person's. For me, that something is being blind. For you, I don't know what it is, but there's something. Everybody has something that makes their life harder than the next person's. And we all face challenges, and there are people that face challenges every day worse than I could ever contemplate. And so, if the worst thing that ever happens to me is that I can't see, then, I'm doing pretty well and am very blessed as far as I'm concerned.
What about your personal relationship with Jesus Christ? When and how did that begin?
I became a Christian at age 11, I believe. Yeah, when I was at age 11. My family had started attending Meridian Baptist Church in Jackson, and we just, there was, after a period of time, we started attending there when I was probably 9 or 10, and after a little while, I just came to understand what Jesus had done for me, and I was, and I was saved at a very early age. I haven't always walked with him like I should, but and I remember even then as a new Christian, and something that's always amazed me about Jesus and about my relationship with him is how much he loves us. We got Valentine's Day coming up next month, and people think about different ways to express their love to people and to loved ones and everything. But I think we don't stop to think about the fact that what he did for us is the ultimate expression of love. He left his place, Jesus did, voluntarily in heaven, where at the right hand of the Father, where he had the worship and the adoration over and authority over all creation. He voluntarily stepped down into the frailty and vulnerability of a human body. He lived a perfect and sinless life, and is the only person to have ever done that. And he knew when he came that he would be ultimately executed through the most horrific means ever devised. And he was fully man, but he was also fully God. He could have stopped it with less than a thought.
What you just shared with us, Scott, is so profound. It's so true. It's so it's a cool drink of water for a dry and parched soul that doesn't have that relationship, who doesn't know why Jesus came, why Jesus Christ offers his life. And that we do, all of us, as you mentioned, have our own hang-ups and necessary, some things that we can't control. There might be a physical, limitation or a disability or something that we have no control over. And we might ask God why. And yet he draws us into this deeper relationship that he wants to know us, and knowing that in this life, in this world, these light and momentary troubles in comparison to eternity, which is what he came to provide, a relationship for us to enjoy with him forever. He said, in my Father's house are many rooms. Hey, if it weren't so, I would tell you, I'm going to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you can come be with me. And so he was seeing the bigger picture, Yeah. And sometimes we're caught up so much in things in this earth that we miss that bigger picture. Now, you additionally worked for a number of years for a company. You were the chief financial operating officer, or is that right, the CFO?
I was the chief financial officer.
You were the chief financial officer for a warehousing company in the Jackson area for a number of years.
Yes.
You lost your job, and I think you had some other employment after that, didn't you?
I did. I lost my job there after about 5 years due to downsizing, and I tried for a couple of years there to get another job in the management accounting field, and that's where most of my experience was, and I felt like I was good at it, and that's what I enjoyed. And so, and I found it difficult, very difficult, because of not so much because of the limitations imposed by my blindness in this case, but the perceptions that people have because of that. There's computer technology. I use a screen reader that allows a computer to talk, and various forms of technology. This is if you're going to be blind, the last 20 years or so is a good time because of all the technological developments. So there are ways that I can use spreadsheets and do all the most of the type stuff that people who can see do with financial statements and analysis and everything. But the big problem is that most people, if they don't know a blind person, and have never been around anybody who blind that could do these things, they don't they don't understand how somebody who can't see the numbers can do such complex things with those numbers.
Right.
And it's human nature to not believe in what you can't understand. And they didn't understand how I could do it, so they just tended to believe that I couldn't. And I don't have a chip on my shoulder about that. If I were on the other side of the desk and I had a guy come in there and tell me that he wanted to be my chief financial officer, I would probably think he was crazy. So I get that. But it makes it hard when, I had two companies, for example, one in Memphis and the other in Nashville, I will not name them, that were seriously talking about moving me. The one in Nashville was actually talking about paying for me to move and helping me find a house and everything. After having talked to me on the phone, after having looked at my resume, looked at my work history, having talked to references. And but I didn't tell them until right before they wanted me to actually come down there to talk to them that I was blind, because I had found out how fast that would shut people down. So they were very interested until they found out I was completely blind in both eyes. And like that, they instantly cut off all communication. They would not respond to my phone calls, to my correspondence. They were just done.
You had a dream about being an author. And I guess this kind of was the kickstart for you, really, to launch into this career that you felt like deep down God was calling you to.
Yeah, well, I went through those employment struggles, and then I did get a job for a little while as a transcriptionist for a few years, and then lost that job due to downsizing, and then I was going through the same old struggles again, what I was just describing. And I was just trying to think, I'm completely blind. I've got a family to provide for, and how do I do this? And I read a lot. I always have loved reading.
I mean, I was reading on your website. You read over 100+ novels every year.
It'll go up and down, but yeah, pretty close to that probably.
I mean, Scott, I
read.
I'm guilty of not even reading one.
And I read a lot of nonfiction too, especially in the mornings in my quiet time. So on average, I'll probably read 100 to 150 books a year between fiction and nonfiction.
I want to talk about this book called In Full View. It's a Christian novel that you've written, and actually, I want you to explain to me about this rewrite re-release. Now, this is something that you wrote originally. Is this your first work that you wrote, and then it was, put out again? Tell me about the process of the book In Full View.
Well, when I was going through these employment struggles the last time around, and I was trying to think what I could do, I thought, well, I've always loved reading, and so I thought, I wonder if I could write. And I had no illusions about being Dean Koontz or John Grisham, but I figured, hey, you don't have to sell millions of copies just to make a living. And so I wrote In Full View, released it in self-published in January of 2014. And it did pretty good at first, and I got some media attention. And I thought, hey, this, maybe I've this is the ticket. This is going to do it. And in the first 3 months, I sold like 50 copies. And to be fair, that's not bad for a first-time self-published author who's nobody's heard of. But you can't make a living with numbers like that either. And at that point, I started to get frustrated with myself and with God. And I felt like, God, I'm sitting here, I'm trying to make a living for my family, and not just draw disability, and and why aren't you helping me with this? Basically, I was like, I've been unemployed at this point for a couple of years. Nothing I was trying was working, and then I was convicted that I was approaching through my recent struggles in those past few years, I had been approaching my walk with Christ in the wrong way. I had been approaching it from the standpoint of what he could do for me rather than what I could do for him. And I came to understand, kind of a long story short, I came to understand through this process that where I am as far as the blindness and everything gives me a platform and an opportunity to witness for him. In fact, even back when I was having the surgeries, and I told you a few minutes ago how I was praying through all that, after a while when they told me that my vision was not going to return, I came to the conclusion then, it was a very hard conclusion to come to, but that it was supposed to be this way because I had prayed my way through it. I had earnestly sought God's will in this process. And yet, all these complications that my doctor said statistically should have basically been impossible happened. And so I had to conclude that it was supposed to be this way. Didn't know why. Well, now I know why. It took me 20 years to figure it out. But, as I prayed through this, the whole situation with the employment situation and the books initially not selling well and all that, God told me, the Spirit said to me, you have this tremendous opportunity that I've given you to witness for me. Because the thing is, with my blindness, a lot of people, I've gone through quite a bit of tribulation as a result of that, and a lot of it fairly obvious. And that's caused some people to come and say, man, you've been through a lot, and you keep a pretty positive attitude and everything, and, how do you do it? And because they ask, they actually want to hear what I have to say. And because they ask, it gives me the opportunity to talk to them.
Gives you that platform.
About Jesus and his role in my life and how he has brought me through all this and how he has even used the negatives, like what I'm describing, to witness for him. And a lot of these people, if I just walked up to them and just started talking, they wouldn't have given me the time of day. But because they asked me, they actually wanted to hear what I have to say.
Scott, what advice would you give to someone that's wrestling with the idea of following their dreams, whether it's writing a book, starting a business, or whatever it may be, if they're following what Christ has called them to do?
Well, first of all, I would say make sure that you're spending a lot of time in the Word and in prayer and really seeking what he wants you to do. Make sure you're doing what he wants you to do, not what makes sense to you, and asking him to bless it. Because Byron asked this question a minute ago, and I kind of got off track a little bit, but initially I did write this as a secular book and targeting the secular market because I thought it would sell more that way. I'm ashamed to say that now, but that's exactly what it was. And once I had been convicted that I could use this as a platform to witness for him, and that in fact was my life's purpose, I re-released it as a Christian novel. And I should have done that in the first place. And I missed out on opportunities to witness because I didn't do that, because I was not completely obedient initially. That's one thing, is make sure that you're really really trying to really follow what he wants you to do, not asking him to bless what you think you should do. Another thing is, don't worry about what kind of limitations you might have, because it doesn't matter. Like I said, for me, there's blindness, and all the challenges related to that, but everybody has something. And it doesn't matter what you can do and what you can't do, because it's not about what you can do anyway. It's about what he can do through you, and he will always give you the means to do what he asks of you.
Well, that's, I think so many of us are riding the fence, willing to take that step of faith, because oftentimes it's stepping out into the unknown, the unseen, and so we all have to kind of walk in blindness in a way. We all have limited sight. We can only see, really the here and now. But God sometimes calls us to step out, in faith, and to trust Him for things that are higher purposes, that are much more satisfying and fulfilling, that bring us greater joy in life, by following Him to that degree. Have you found that to be true in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And where I am now is not at all where I would have pictured myself 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. I still wanted to get back into the world of management, accounting and finance, and, make a lot of money. And part of that was to prove, to people that blindness, the fact of my blindness defines who I am to a lot of people, and I wanted to show them that I could accomplish something worthwhile. But it's not about proving yourself. I think a lot of people do that in one way or another. They're trying to prove themselves.
We think it's because we're looking for that identity, where we should find our identity in Jesus Christ, because that really where is, He says, I've come to give you life and that you might have it more abundantly, and it's in Him that we truly find that abundant life.
It truly is. And the thing is, I'm sure you've heard it said, Byron, that God wants better things for you than you want for yourself. And that's true. That's very true. But it's important to remember that the greater things that He has in mind for you sometimes don't bear any resemblance to the great things that you have in mind for you. Yeah. But still, what He has in mind is a lot better than anything you could ever possibly imagine. I could not have imagined myself where I am 3 or 4 years ago as a Christian author and speaker. But I can honestly say that the last couple of years since I've surrendered to the call to this ministry, this is by far the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Okay. Now, you are available, as you mentioned. You've written 2 books. The first book, In Full View, and the sequel, The Viewfinder. Both books are available. I guess our listeners can go online. Where to Amazon? Where can they go get those books? Well,
the best place to get them is to go to scottduck.com, SCOTTDUCK.com, and there's more information about the books. There are purchase links to Amazon. You can get them as in paperback and as a Kindle ebook.
Are there Braille copies of the book too? I was just thinking, if somebody had a family member that was blind and maybe thought this book might encourage them, could they find that as a gift?
There are not. I could now. It is possible to. If somebody has a Braille embosser, I could send it to them as a text file, and they could emboss it that way.
Okay.
But you can't actually you cannot buy it as a Braille book. But these days, a lot of people who do use Braille, myself included, will just get it we'll get it electronically, and then you can use what's called a refreshable Braille display to make it. It's a little device that actuates the dots up and down, and it makes it so that you can read Braille off a computer.
So that's an option too.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And if somebody wanted to hear your story, if you could go speak to a church, maybe a company, a corporation that would like to have you come and share with maybe one of their luncheons or meetings.
Yeah, sure.
How can they contact you?
They can go to scottduck.com, and there's got my email address on there, or they can email me at scottduck1977@gmail.com. But that's on the website. And I've got on the website, there's information about these books. There's also going to be a third book in the series called, probably going to be called Hidden from View, and that's going to be out this fall. I have a nonfiction book coming out here in a couple of months called Blind Faith, which is largely biographical. And that will be, information will be up about that on the website soon.
So you're staying busy.
Yeah, I am. I will. If anybody happens to be attending the Mid-South Men's Bible Conference at Faith Baptist, I'll be selling my books there. I'll be one of the vendors there in late February. So that's also an option, and you can I'll be selling and signing those.
Again, that website is scottduck.com. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
scottduck.com. And you can hear, more information about the ministry, your book writing, and I guess different places you'll be too if you're going to be in certain areas.
Yeah, and I welcome anybody, like you said, as far as I would love the opportunity to come to share my testimony at, like you said, for corporations, for any Christian church. I am Southern Baptist, but I would love to come to any Christian church and share my testimony if you would like me to do that, and because I just love sharing what God has done for me and what He can do for everybody else too.
Scott Duck, God bless you, my dear brother. Thank you for what you're doing for Christ's kingdom through writing books and sharing the love of Jesus through the opportunities He gives you. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Yes, sir, and thank you.
Friends, that's all the time we have on this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler. We'll talk to you next time. Hey, don't forget now that website is scottduck.com, scottduck.com. Go and check out information about Scott's ministry. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.